Hello, I'm Andrew Reilly, OEM Account Manager with Audinate, and welcome to Dante Dialogues. In this series, we'll be talking with Dante device manufacturers and Dante Network users to learn more about how they are creating amazing experiences with audiences around the world using networked audio and video. My guests today are Tom Waterman, Senior Product Marketing Manager, and Mike Tabor, Senior Product Manager with Universal Audio. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew.
For some of our audience who might not be familiar, can you give us a background and a history of the legacy of Universal Audio?
Yeah, definitely. I've been here about 10 years. I think Mike's been here a couple of years, but the company goes way, way back. Originally founded by Bill Putnam Sr. in the, I guess, really the late 50s, but it actually kind of harks back to just after the Second World War with early recording and early vinyl recording. And Bill Sr. had actually been like the first guy to use reverb on a musical recording in the late 40s and then go on into the 50s, founding Universal Audio to effectively build studios for the likes of Frank Sinatra and Ray Charles and these legacy studios and legacy studio consoles, namely this console we had called the 610, which was an all-valve desk, which in some cases I think you would call it the first off-the-shelf mixing console, which is pretty mind-blowing. It was almost the first desk with a modular channel strip that had an echo send and a pan pot and a fader and all those things that you probably take for granted today. They're on every digital console, they're on every DAW piece of software that you would use, but really that sort of harks back to at that point, people were making customized things in all of their studios. Les Paul's quite famous for doing that with his Octopus recording system. And, Bill's in that sort of era. So we go back a very long way. And that led to things like the LA2A and the 1176 compressors, which are some of the most famous dynamic range control devices in modern music recording history. And then the company sort of fell dormant for a little while. And then Bill's son, Bill Putnam Jr., who's actually the CEO of the company now today, still a family-run business, actually refounded Universal Audio with some very clever people that had PhDs, largely from Stanford, and really tried to bring that analog legacy into the modern era by emulating all of these classic audio tools in the digital domain, and that's really what led to the UAD plugins that we know and love today that have, really it's like a curated museum of all analog recording, from tape machines to vintage reverbs and delays. And over time that's led to the company building interfaces and all the products we're here to talk to you about today with our Dante connectivity on the Apollo interface range. And it's been a really good journey and a long journey. We've got a great long-standing legacy that goes all the way back through generations of the same family, which I think is really great.
It's interesting seeing the evolution of some of these legacy analog pieces that were developed out of necessity, just to fit dynamic range onto tape or for broadcast signals, that now today we just appreciate the sonic character of this for music application. Can you talk a little bit more about that hardware emulation process and what has come out of that for UA with the Unison preamp technology? How does that sort of take shape in your ecosystem of products today on the digital side?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I mean, it's interesting you mentioned dynamic range control, and I'll just start there very quickly. It used to be that you would ride the faders to tape, obviously, to maintain a balance while you were recording, and there's only so many faders you can grab by hand before it's too many and you're clipping and having all these sorts of issues. So things like the LA2A compressor were actually invented just to be automatic gain control devices, so you didn't have to do as much hand juggling on the console. And these are all kind of tools of convenience. And that's actually the first plugin that UA ever emulated. So in there, we're emulating nonlinear behavior of the optical cells in the compressor, the tube circuitry, the saturation, and over time we've kind of improved the modeling as we do sort of like iterative updates to the plugins where we've really sort of nailed the full analog behavior characteristics of the whole thing, from the saturation curves to the compression to the harmonic content and the frequency responses. And something like Unison technology, which for anyone who's listening who's not sure what that is, with the first Apollo interface, which dates back to about 2012, we took this approach to modeling where it's like a synergy of the analog domain and the digital domain together. So your microphones, they react differently depending on the mic preamp they're plugged into because of things like impedance, and the load presented to the microphone. That's particularly noticeable on dynamic microphones like ribbon mics and things like your classic SM57s or something like this SD1 mic that we're all talking on now. They really respond to big changes in loading. And the Unison technology, effectively, it emulates the front end loading of all these traditional mic preamps from all of the classic brands. Our own 610 console going back to the Frank Sinatra, Putnam Senior legacy, all the way to, say, British designs like the Neve 1073 or the classic American recording consoles like API. And what you get with that is almost a change in response from the mic itself as it's connected to an Apollo preamp, which is dynamically changing the loading. But it also recreates the sort of gain range and the gain curve that you would get from that original piece of hardware. And the clever thing about the synergy of the analog and the digital domain in the Unison technology is that then the DSP on board the Apollo interfaces at this point in real time will process that signal and emulate all of the frequency response and saturation characteristics of the thing you're emulating. That could be a guitar pedal, it could be a mic preamp, it could be a guitar amp. But with the mic preamps particularly, you end up then having almost the full experience of having your mic connected to a vintage Helios channel or a vintage Neve channel and actually dialing in the full range of gain and saturation. And then obviously the full convenience of digital because it's recallable, it's instantly savable. You can copy settings from channel to channel. You can switch preamp in a matter of seconds from one flavor to another. So for a creative application where you're clicking through different, in this case, you could even be switching microphones in some of our technology, but you could be effectively A-Bing everything about your recording chain in seconds, which is way beyond the analog patching required that you would have done historically. So I think we've tried to recreate the old world with the convenience of modern digital technology, and that really is the sort of ethos of UA in that sense.
Yeah, so you're giving your customers a virtual mic locker. You're giving them virtual channel strips that they can audition as they're going through the creative process. And with the Apollo range and built-in DSP real-time processing, you're giving them at a click of a button an entire analog recording studio in an audio interface. Mike, I want to ask you from a design perspective and from a product perspective, how have you found some of your users taking advantage of the real-time processing offered with the Apollo range?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Tom mentioned, this whole heritage, or like you mentioned, like this locker of gear, right, has been meant to model all of this vintage analog gear that's been used in studios forever. And of course, there's a lot of users that are using these in studios. But one thing that is a growing part of our business and really like customer led is bringing this vintage sound from studio to stage. And there's a couple examples of this that have been happening in the field for a while. One of which is users just bringing Apollo Twins, which is our flagship desktop interface. They'll be bringing that to shows and building it into a little custom rack and using a Neve preamp on it, running through auto-tune, all just so they can have that in real time on the stage. We also, Universal Audio had the UAD2 Live Rack, which was a MADI-based device that we've since EOL'd, but was also purpose-built for live sound. It had a subset of our UAD2 plugins, again, with that same aspiration of just bringing, for these major tours around the world, that exact same channel strip that they used in their studio when they recorded their album, they can bring it out on tour with them and, like Tom mentioned, have it recallable, scriptable. They can automate parameters of it in real time. So it's really the goal to make, the experience in that concert just as like seamless and awesome as it is as you're listening to the record in your car or in your home.
Yeah, you listen to some of these, documentaries on, bands of old, specifically like the Beatles. They were doing all these cool recording tricks along the way that they couldn't recreate on stage. And now with all of the, DSP and backing tracks and everything that you can do in the studio, there's been a much greater push to be able to recreate that live in front of an audience with all the same grandeur that you were able to do in the studio. So it's really interesting to see how mixing engineers and musicians are tackling that with technology to be able to offer that to their audiences live.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, even just the economies of scale, right? Like imagine trying to truck around racks and racks of LA2As or 1176s or Manleys or whatever it is. Like just the overhead of maintaining, moving all that stuff and being able to actually use it practically in like the new age digital large festival or show format is just kind of unrealistic. So, we're really trying to capitalize on a need that just hasn't been fulfilled before.
Yeah. So you mentioned with Apollo Twin, it's just the form factor of it, the amount of horsepower that it has to, offer for live use. Your customers yeah, figured out a way to rack it, put it in fly cases, and take it on the road with them. It sounds like with what you've accomplished with Apollo networked audio as the next step in this range, that you're able to build a better mousetrap for your customers that's more elegant and purpose built. Historically, those systems were expanded via Thunderbolt to add more DSP resources, add more I/O. But
Right.
what additional benefits does networked audio add to that foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just taking a step back, UA entered the Dante ecosystem like mid 2024. We came out with the X16D, which was the first Dante-enabled Apollo that has hexacore DSP processing on it that does all the great things we just talked about. And just recently, earlier this year, here I have it, we released two accessories, the Apollo E1X and the Apollo E2M, that are essentially network extensions of the Apollo ecosystem. So to your point, this kind of changes the way that users would approach having UA processing in a show environment, right? They could have their X16D near their main rack or near their mixing console or wherever like the engineer is standing, because it's still controlled over Thunderbolt via computer where you can change all parameters. But these accessories, which function as mic line interfaces or just line interfaces and headphone amps for the other device, they can be anywhere on the network, accessible with the network drop. So it really opens up the flexibility of the user's ergonomics of their system to put these things wherever they need to be.
Yeah, it also, Mike, brings the kind of, I suppose, the cutting edge analog technology, our prowess in that domain, which goes back to the 50s, like I say, into the live space, because we'd seen customers using twins for things like auto-tune, where you want low latency. And the benefit of the Apollo is you've got DSP chips on board that can process, sub 2 millisecond times from input to output through great processing. And so people carry them as reverb racks, and they've been using them as like an analog in, analog out rack of Lexicon reverbs, for example, or an auto-tune system for a playback tech or somebody on tour. And like you say, Andrew, we've had a lot of fly rigs with twins in them. But the live rack product that Mike was sort of mentioning, the legacy sort of live solution with optical MADI, whilst it did and was scalable to a 4-unit system with 64 I/O, it halved at 96K. We know that most front of house consoles run at 96K for the lowest latency, and it also offered no Unison technology. It had no way of giving you that last little bit of connectivity into the into analog from your microphones to emulate front end preamps and things like that, and then carry on processing with the rest of the channel strip there. And the benefit with Apollo networked audio, since we launched the X16D last year, I think it was the summer of last year, and then the E-Series peripheral extenders that Mike's mentioning now, or expansion units that we brought out in the last couple of months, is they really bring the analog connectivity and the Unison technology to that live solution, almost like if you wanted to make star channel stage racks and things like that for your key inputs and have that level of processing and cue distribution on stage or in the studio. They kind of straddle both worlds, from live to broadcast and on-air processing as well as studio recording. But I think that's really the benefit of the X16 and Apollo networked audio, or the X16D, I should say, and Apollo networked audio, is the capability to expand with the E-Series and go beyond what Live Rack could do, really.
Across those different application types that you just mentioned, broadcast, studio, live performance, there are a number of audio over IP standards being used currently.
Mm-hmm.
Why Dante, and why does that fit well with where UA is trying to go for your customers in the future?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. First and foremost, the interoperability with Dante devices is vast. So many manufacturers, so many devices. It's a ubiquitous, almost at this point, transport protocol. So it was an easy decision for UA to make to go into the Dante ecosystem to play well with others, right? One of our core values as a company is better together. So even better with other devices is important to us. Another key part of it is redundancy, right? We were talking about users putting Twin X in racks. Well, guess what? They would put two Twin X in racks and then have a switcher to redundantly switch them when needed. Now the ability to have a device with network failover on a large system, including one with the X16D, was a large motivation for us, especially in these use cases with like high stakes, high tension broadcasts or gigs. So that was a big part of it, and also deterministic low latency, right? One thing that UA has always been prided on is hardware DSP that is deterministic low latency. So combine that with the industry leading audio transport, deterministic and low latency. It's kind of like the best of both worlds of like you're always going to have that audio show up on time and intact the way you want it to be.
I think as you talked about the Unison technology and being able to distribute that wherever you need to, on stage or whatever environment that you're in. Can you talk a little bit about how the Dante Network enables that with Apollo U1X?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Tom was mentioning earlier, right, like Unison technology is really like half in the hardware, like impedance circuitry domain and half in the DSP processing. So when you're using an X16D somewhere on the network and an E1X somewhere on the network, the DSP awesomeness is happening on the X16D, but in real time, it's controlling the circuitry on this E1X over the Dante network to make sure that it's actually loading that microphone properly with the proper impedance load, for example, that Tom mentioned. So there's a whole pipeline of information that's being sent between these devices, including recallability, being able to automate settings if you wanted to, or change scenes. That's all happening over the same network that the audio is flowing over, and UA has built a lot of tech on that network to be able to control these devices in real time.
I think that's something that Audinate feels very strongly about as well. It's not just getting audio from point A to point B. It's offering a better experience in terms of control and management of devices. You talked about demystifying network technology and IP, and I think ultimately great hardware is made better by easy-to-use software. And I think the partnership that UA has with Audinate and Dante is a great use case for that. UAD Console is the backbone of the Apollo system. What decisions did you make in the sort of integration of the overall platform? It's sort of the word that we use as well for Dante, in that it's not just endpoints, it's also software, cloud management, routing that makes the hardware easier to use on a network, which can sometimes be confusing, especially for musicians. I speak as one myself, that is maybe not as approachable for some of the audience that may be getting into networking for the first time. So in your design considerations for the overall Apollo ecosystem, and specifically with UAD Console, what does it do, and why do customers need to learn more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So UAD Console, in general, is like the backbone control of all Apollo devices. It's where you go in and you can change your plugin parameters, you can recall or save sessions, all of your monitoring functionality. If you want to be an Atmos monitoring or stereo monitoring, your Q mixes, it is like the control brain for all Apollos. When we were building the X16D and the Apollo E1Xs, we brought in various Dante features into UAD Console to make it just simpler for our users. For the most part, universal audio users are not as well versed in Dante, or they have never used Dante Controller, though they can go use it. We've built some of that functionality directly into UAD Console. I can show you live. So as you mentioned, UAD Console is the backbone to all Apollo devices. It is essentially the desktop app for Mac and Windows that discovers your UA devices. Like right here, you can see I have 3 Apollos connected, an Apollo X8P, turn down my reverb. I have an Apollo X16D, and I have an Apollo X4, all connected to each other. This UI allows you to add some of those awesome Unison plugins that Tom was talking about earlier, like a Neve 1073 that's going to load your microphone like a Neve would and also do the DSP directly on the Apollo, for example. It gives you a main mixing, fader section to make your main mix. It allows you to make Q mixes for performers, aux sends for things like reverb, like this pure plate or this Hitsfield chamber I have up here. So it's got everything in here. It allows you to recall sessions exactly how you had it at the day of the recording session, for example. More specific to Dante, there's a couple really neat things that we've built into this. First and foremost, if you have Apollo E1Xs or E2Ms connected to your X16D and you go down and you change your sample rate, it's going to change the sample rate of all your devices. It's going to make sure they're aligned so you don't have to individually go and edit any devices. Likewise, we've actually added in some network setting views so you can actually see all your UA Apollo devices on the network, what their IP addresses are. You can identify them from here, so they'll blink the LEDs, and we actually be able to physically identify the device. We've built in some Dante latency control manipulation, so I could actually automatically set all the Dante transport latency directly from within UAD Console, again, without having to navigate to each device. And probably last, but certainly not least, is the ability to do Dante routing directly within UAD Console. So right here, this microphone is actually what I'm talking to you through. This is my E1X with an API preamp on it and a little bit of processing. If I click this Dante source button, you can see that I'm actually browsing through all the channels that are available on my network. And, just really quickly, if I kind of side-by-side this with Dante Controller, you can see I have one Dante route from the E1X. I got a couple Dante routes from the X16D back to my E2M headphone amplifier. In real time, I can go and say, let's say I want to pick off a channel from one of Audinate's AVIO devices. That shows up directly here. It's going to create that route in Dante Controller in real time. You'll notice if I select another E1X device, which is kind of like the secret sauce that has the Unison technology capable, it's actually going to kind of blow up and show you a preamp that now you can add Unison processing to. So we've built a lot of tech into UAD Console for all Apollos, but also for Dante Apollos, to really just make this like a single app user experience that gives you as much power as you can in one place. If you're a non-X16D user and you just have Apollo E1Xs on your network, you can see like these two are kind of controlled by my X16D. They're almost in an exclusive mode because of that kind of DSP processing that happens. These others are just remote controlled preamps. Like we're just sending gain, phantom power, pad, mute commands over that Dante network using the Dante API like we talked earlier that allows you to just remote control these preamps, really just transparent preamps at this point anywhere on the network. No touch from the user, all controlled directly from UAD Console running on a computer on your network. So this really is kind of the hub of all Apollo stuff, and now it is the hub of Apollo plus Dante stuff for UA users.
I love how we've split the mic preamp technology almost in half and kept half of it back in the X16D and the front end in the E1X, and that's all PoE as well. So you've got power over Ethernet feeding all your distributed E-series products, pulling them in here. It's so neat.
Absolutely, and I'll just kind of show you a little bit about continuing to make routes. So it's really just that easy. Just drag and click and drag, click and click, I should say.
Mike, as well, do we have auto gain across these inputs?
We do. You know what? I did not even mention that. But as featured in all of our Apollo Gen 2 devices, auto gain is really a feature of these new Gen 2 and UAD Console users that allows you to, with one click, be able to kind of tell auto gain to listen to the signal for a set amount of time. And you could even define like certain audio thresholds or peak targets. Target peak. Let it listen, and it will automatically gain up your signal in real time. I'm not going to do it right now just because you'll kind of lose my voice. But yes, that is also a feature of the E1Xs when paired with an X16D in this console view here.
Yeah, we're kind of calling these like smart assistive tools, particularly with Luna now, where you're able to talk to your DAW to give it commands. But I think having assistive auto gain on PoE distributed mic preamps that can also be Unison technology there, and auto gain then functions on a few titles like the SSL, the Neve, the API. Being able to just have it set gains for your drum kit in a studio situation just by playing is phenomenally fast. And I think bringing all of that technology together with the Dante distribution across the network is just like such a great way to tie E-Series with X16D, and great work from the Ordinate team and the UA team to make it all possible and kind of grow the experience of UAD Console. Yeah.
Well, especially in the creative environment, you want the technology to work for you, not get in the way of what you're trying to do, especially when you have talent in front of you, as an engineer or as a musician trying to work with others, and having multiple control applications and layers and all these other menus can be distracting. So putting it all in a central hub of UAD Console is really slick.
Yeah, it's always what we try and do is bring the musicality first. It's sort of a very conscious decision with UI design at UA. Lots of UIs, but we're trying to make it the least paper cut workflow, the best inspiration from a musical point of view, and like you say, by being able to root directly in UAD Console, you're automatically processing these Dante streams with this library, this almost museum of classic legendary audio processing, and you're just right into the musical, creativity part, whether that's a live show, front of house, or broadcast on air, or recording studio, or an educational facility, all of which take advantage of Dante. This is just a great offering across the board for us.
You speak about those different applications and sort of where X16D is being used. It's been out in the world for the past year or so. How has Dante and X16D been used and received by Apollo users?
Yeah, really well. I think we had quite a loyal user base in live through either using Apollo over analog or the Live Rack product we previously mentioned with Maddie. And with X16D, I think it's been a natural evolution because these users have seen the benefit of Dante really quickly. They're often using front of house consoles that are either Dante based, like the Yamaha stuff, or have Dante option cards, like so many of the high end front of house consoles do. And so, we've got a great team of product experts at UA effectively that have liaised with a lot of engineers. Last year, we ran this team to kind of seed a lot of high-end users with the X16D. And I think I'm really pleased with the take-up. We're seeing it on major tours. It's been on Bob Dylan's tour. We've seen it on Glastonbury Festival here in the UK just recently, all the way through to broadcast situations and on-air, OB trucks. And just really excited to see where it goes now with the E-Series, like we've talked about today. The fact that you can expand and bring the Unison technology story in to Apollo X16D, to have your Q distribution to headphone outputs, the line interfacing, which is perfect for things like our aux and UAFX pedal technology that you could have on stage, which we're also seeing people use. Those are pedals used in the Sphere Las Vegas for some very big shows with a couple of bands there, and being able to bring all of this together and distribute over Dante, I'm just really excited for what the future's going to hold for that, and how people will bring E-Series into the fold to kind of do the endpoints in analog at the same time. It's just a really interesting time for us.
Likewise. Yeah, we really appreciate the partnership with Universal Audio, integrating Dante into your next generation of Apollo networked products, and are equally as excited to see where the next generations of musicians take this technology and use it creatively. Mike, Tom, thank you so much for your time today in talking about everything that we've been working on together. For those customers that are looking to learn more, where can we find more information about Universal Audio and your Dante-enabled products?
Yeah, I would go to www.uaudio.com and then also check us out on Instagram. Just find Universal Audio on Instagram. And then Google Apollo Networked Audio, and that will bring you directly to our blogs and landing pages around the technology for X16D and E-Series, and that would be the fastest way to find out more, I think.
Thank you both so much. Appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks so much.
For more information about Dante training and certification, a full listing of all Dante-enabled products available from our partners globally, and resources for OEMs looking to become a Dante development partner, please please visit getdante.com.